Sarah Washington stood behind the rich mahogany witness stand, her dark fingers tracing invisible patterns on its polished surface as she watched District Attorney James Morrison pace before the jury like a predator sizing up its prey. The morning light streaming through the tall courthouse windows caught the silver at his temples, making him look distinguished. But Sarah knew better than to be fooled by appearances. After 20 years in corporate America, the veteran prosecutor adjusted his silk tie, a move she had noticed he made whenever he was about to go in for the kill. The jury box held 12 people who seemed to lean forward slightly whenever Morrison spoke, his reputation as Boston's most successful prosecutor preceding him like a wave. Sarah couldn't help but notice how their eyes skipped over her Harvard degree and multiple cybersecurity certifications, displayed out the evidence screen, choosing instead to focus on Morrison's theatrical gestures as he wielded her professional credentials like weapons. The courtroom itself felt like a theater, with its soaring ceilings, ornate moldings, and rows of spectators filling every available seat, some of them former colleagues from Reynolds Technologies who whispered behind their hands whenever Morrison landed what they thought was a particularly clever jab. The air conditioning hummed quietly overhead, doing little to dispel the stuffiness that had settled in courtroom 714 as the morning wore on. Sarah adjusted her charcoal gray blazer, remembering how her mother had helped her choose it the night before, saying it protected authority without seeming aggressive. A tightrope she had been walking her entire career as the only black woman in Reynolds Technologies' executive circle. The blazer's shoulder pads felt like armor now as Morrison approached the witness stand for what felt like the 100th time that morning, his Italian leather shoes clicking against the marble floor. Behind her, Sarah could sense rather than see her attorney, Michael Chen, shifting in his chair, his objections to Morrison's increasingly personal line of questioning having been overruled 3 times already. The scratch of his pen against legal pad providing a subtle reminder that someone in this room still believed in her despite Morrison's best efforts to paint her as nothing more than an affirmative action hire who had stumbled upon corporate documents she couldn't possibly understand. The district attorney had spent the last hour attempting to dismantle her credibility piece by piece, his voice dripping with fake concern as he questioned how someone with her background could possibly recognize signs of corporate espionage, the implied meaning behind his words hanging in the air like smoke, making several jurors shift uncomfortably in their seats, while others nodded along, their biases confirmed by his masterful performance. Judge Elena Martinez watched the proceedings from her elevated bench, her dark eyes narrowing slightly as Morrison held up a stack of Sarah's security reports with exaggerated confusion, asking her to explain terms like penetration testing and vulnerability assessment as if they were foreign concepts rather than industry standard procedures that Sarah had been performing for 8 years as Reynolds Technologies' senior cybersecurity analyst. The gallery behind Sarah, filled with press and curious onlookers, buzzed with quiet energy as Morrison prepared his next attack, his carefully crafted questions designed to make her appear incompetent while maintaining just enough professional courtesy to avoid official censure. Sarah felt her jaw tighten as he approached again, but kept her spine straight, remembering the encrypted data transfers she had discovered, the suspicious patterns that had kept her up nights, the undeniable evidence that someone inside Reynolds Technologies was selling secrets to the highest bidder. Thunder rolled in the distance as Morrison picked up another piece of evidence, his gold cufflinks catching the fluorescent light as he turned to face the jury box again, his trademark smirk playing across his features as he prepared to continue his systematic dismantling of everything Sarah had worked so hard to build. But something in his expression shifted slightly as the heavy courtroom doors swung open, admitting a man whose presence would soon turn everything upside down. Morrison twirled a silver pen between his fingers as he circled the witness stand like a shark in expensive wool, his Salvatore Ferragamo shoes tapping a precise rhythm against the courthouse floor, while he held up printouts of Sarah's emails to the Reynolds Technologies board of directors, the afternoon light casting strange shadows across his face as his Boston accent grew thicker with each condescending question, a trick Sarah had noticed he used to appear more relatable to the working-class jurors who filled the right side of the jury box. The prosecutor paused for dramatic effect, letting the silence stretch uncomfortably as he shuffled through the papers, making a show of reorganizing them while shooting knowing looks at the jury, especially juror number 8, a middle-aged man who had listed his occupation as support and who Morrison clearly hoped would validate his implications about Sarah's supposed technical incompetence. The juror shifted in his seat, clearly uncomfortable with the role being thrust upon him, while several others scribbled notes in their court-provided notepads. Behind her, Sarah could hear the quiet rustle of newspaper photographers adjusting their cameras, the soft electronic whir of their shutters, capturing every micro-expression that crossed her face. She kept her features carefully neutral, even as Morrison began reading from her technical reports, his voice taking on an exaggerated tone of confusion when he reached terms like cryptographic protocols and zero-day vulnerabilities, terms that any first-year cybersecurity student would understand. Judge Elena Martinez leaned forward slightly in her high-backed leather chair, her silver reading glasses reflecting the fluorescent lights. As she watched Morrison with increasing disapproval, her long fingers drumming a steady beat against her desktop that echoed through the hushed courtroom like distant artillery, the warning clear to everyone except the prosecutor, who seemed drunk on his own performance. The gallery's wooden benches creaked as spectators shifted their weight, the growing tension in the room almost physical as Morrison launched into another round of questioning, his voice dripping with fake solicitude as he asked Sarah to explain basic network security concepts as if she were teaching a kindergarten class. Several jurors looked increasingly uncomfortable with his tone, while others seemed almost eager to accept his characterization of her, their own biases rising to the surface like oil on water. Sarah felt her nails digging into her palms beneath the witness stand, but kept her voice steady and professional as she answered each question with precision, refusing to let him bait her into an emotional response that would only reinforce the angry black woman stereotype. She had spent her entire career avoiding the weight of that constant self-control settling across her shoulders like a familiar but unwelcome companion. Detective Marcus Rodriguez from the Financial Crimes Division sat at the front row, his jaw tightening visibly as Morrison picked up a new stack of documents, this time emails between Sarah and the company's chief technology officer, warning him about suspicious data transfers that seemed to originate from executive-level accounts. The prosecutor's voice took on an almost sing-song quality as he questioned whether she might have misinterpreted innocent communications given her limited experience with corporate culture. The air in the courtroom grew thicker as Morrison began pacing again, his confidence seeming to grow with each step, while Sarah's attorney Michael Chen scribbled furiously on his yellow legal pad, his objections to the prosecutor's tone having been overruled so many times that he now seemed to be building a record for appeal, rather than expecting any immediate relief from the court. Thunder rumbled again, closer now, as Morrison turned back to the jury, his voice taking on an almost theatrical quality as he gestured towards Sarah with the stack of emails, suggesting that perhaps she had simply found herself in a position beyond her capabilities at Reynolds Technologies, the implications of his words hanging in the air like smoke, until a sharp crack of lightning illuminated the courtroom windows, causing several spectators to jump in their seats, the storm outside providing a fitting backdrop to the psychological warfare playing out within these marble walls. Michael Chen exploded from his chair for the 7th time that morning, his normally composed demeanor cracking as Morrison crossed yet another line, the defense attorney's silver streaked hair catching the storm light from the windows as he jabbed an accusatory finger toward the prosecution table, his voice carrying to the farthest corners of the courtroom. Objection, Your Honor, this line of questioning goes beyond badgering the witness and ventures into openly discriminatory territory. Judge Martinez raised her hand to silence the murmurs that rippled through the gallery, her eyes sharp as she considered Chen's objection, while Morrison stood with practiced innocence before her bench, his hands spread wide in a gesture of false confusion, as if he couldn't possibly understand how anyone could interpret his questions about affirmative action hiring practices as anything but relevant to establishing the witness's credibility. Sarah felt her chest tighten as she watched the familiar dance play out before her, the same subtle dismissal of her achievements she had faced throughout her career at Reynolds Technologies, wrapped in layers of plausible deniability that made it impossible to challenge without appearing oversensitive. She forced her breathing to remain steady, remembering the countless nights she had spent tracking suspicious data patterns through the company's networks, the growing certainty that something sinister lurked beneath the surface of routine corporate operations. The air in the courtroom crackled with tension as Chen and Morrison faced off before the bench, their whispered arguments carrying hints of venom that belied their professional facades. While Sarah's mind raced back to the night she had finally uncovered the truth, her computer screen filling with undeniable evidence of data transfers to servers in Shanghai, the cold fear that had gripped her as she realized the magnitude of what she had discovered. Detective Rodriguez shifted forward in his seat as Sarah began describing the technical details of her investigation, her voice gaining strength as she moved into familiar territory, explaining how she had first noticed anomalies in the network traffic patterns during routine security audits, the suspicious timestamps that had prompted her to dig deeper, the encrypted packets that seemed to bypass normal security protocols in ways that suggested inside knowledge. Morrison paced like a caged animal as Sarah's testimony continued, his earlier smugness giving way to something closer to concern as she methodically laid out the evidence she had gathered over 3 months of careful investigation, her descriptions precise and technical, leaving no room for misinterpretation or dismissal, the jury leaning forward in their seats as they began to understand the sophistication of her analysis. The gallery had fallen completely silent now. Even the most hostile spectators seemed caught up in Sarah's account of the night. Security had appeared at her office door, 2 armed guards and a nervous HR representative bearing termination papers and a non-disclosure agreement that they tried to pressure her into signing on the spot, the memory of that humiliation burning fresh in her mind as she described being escorted from the building like a criminal by carrying the encrypted flash drive that contained her evidence pressed against her palm inside her closed fist. Chen had returned to his seat but remained coiled like a spring, ready to object at the slightest provocation, while Morrison seemed to be regrouping his earlier strategy in shambles as Sarah's testimony painted a picture not of an incompetent diversity hire but of a highly skilled professional who had uncovered something that powerful people had desperately wanted to keep hidden, the storm outside providing a dramatic counterpoint to her words as lightning flashed across the windows. The temperature in the courtroom seemed to drop several degrees as Sarah described the pattern of suspicious meetings she had documented between Reynolds Technologies executives and unknown outside parties, the late-night security footage she had archived showing familiar faces entering the building at strange hours, the surge in data transfers that always seemed to follow these mysterious gatherings, the pieces of a puzzle that had finally clicked into place just hours before her sudden termination. Thunder rolled overhead as Sarah prepared to reveal the most damning evidence of all, but before she could continue, the heavy courtroom doors swung open with decisive force, drawing every eye in the room toward the figure who stepped through them, his presence about to change everything. The heavy mahogany doors of Courtroom 714 swung open with an authoritative force that seemed to suck all the oxygen from the room, the sharp click of dress shoes against marble echoing through the sudden silence as a tall man in a perfectly pressed black suit strode purposefully down the center aisle, his presence commanding attention without a single word being spoken, his government ID badge catching the storm light as it swung from a lanyard around his neck. Time seemed to slow as the mysterious figure approached the bench, his ramrod straight posture and military haircut marking him as someone accustomed to authority, while his mirrored sunglasses reflected the faces of curious spectators who craned their necks to watch his progress. The red striped envelope he carried, marked with bold letters spelling classified, seemed to pulse with importance in the charged atmosphere of the courtroom. Sarah felt her heart hammering against her ribs as she watched Judge Martinez accept the envelope, her usually steady hands trembling slightly as she broke the heavy wax seal. The sound of tearing paper sharp as a gunshot in the hushed courtroom. Even Morrison had gone completely still, his earlier bravado evaporating as he watched the judge's expression change while she read the contents. The silence grew heavier with each passing moment, broken only by the occasional rumble of thunder and the soft rustle of papers. As Judge Martinez turned page after page, her complexion growing increasingly pale beneath her olive skin, her reading glasses slipping down her nose unnoticed as she became absorbed in whatever revelations the mysterious document contained. The jury watched with rapt attention as their judge's professional mask cracked, revealing flickers of shock and what might have been anger. Detective Rodriguez had risen halfway out of his seat, his hand unconsciously moving toward where a service weapon would normally rest, while the man in the black suit remained motionless beside the bench, his presence radiating calm authority, even as tension built in the room like pressure before a storm. The gathered reporters sensed a story breaking before their eyes, their pens scratching frantically against notepads as they tried to capture every detail. Sarah noticed Chen sitting straighter in his chair, a slight smile playing at the corners of his mouth, as if he had expected something like this, while Morrison began loosening his tie with one finger, his previous confidence dissolving into visible nervousness. As Judge Martinez finally looked up from the documents, her face set in lines of grim determination as she pressed the button to summon her bailiff. The uniformed bailiff approached the bench with swift precision, accepting the judge's whispered instructions before moving to secure the courtroom doors, preventing anyone from entering or leaving. The atmosphere growing thick with anticipation as Judge Martinez removed her reading glasses, folding them with deliberate care before addressing the now silent room, her voice carrying an edge that Sarah had not heard before. Lightning flashed across the windows, illuminating the scene in stark relief as the man in the black suit finally removed his sunglasses, revealing sharp eyes that swept the courtroom with professional assessment, landing briefly on Sarah with what might have been approval before focusing on Morrison, who had begun to sweat visibly at his prosecution table, his expensive suit no longer projecting authority, but instead making him look like a child playing dress-up. The gallery erupted in whispered conversations as Judge Martinez gestured for both attorneys to approach the bench, the sound of their shoes against marble floor creating a strange counterpoint to the thunder that now seemed to be directly overhead. Chen moved with confident purpose, while Morrison seemed to drag his feet, each step carrying him closer to what he must have realized would be the end of his carefully constructed case. Sarah watched as the three lawyers huddled in an intense discussion at the bench, their whispered conference punctuated by Morrison's increasingly agitated gestures, while the mysterious government agent stood slightly apart, his presence a silent reminder of whatever bombshell the classified envelope had contained. The jury leaned forward as one trying to catch snippets of the heated exchange, their faces showing a mixture of confusion and anticipation as they sensed the dramatic shift about to unfold in the case before them. Silence descended over the courtroom like a heavy blanket as Special Agent Catherine Torres took the stand, her NSA credentials displayed in high definition on the overhead screen, the stark government seal seeming to glow against the black background, while Morrison slumped in his chair, his earlier swagger replaced by a sickly pallor that made him look decades older than he had just hours before. Agent Torres adjusted her dark blazer with practiced precision, her silver NSA pin catching the light as she settled into the witness chair, her close-cropped dark hair and ramrod straight posture speaking of a military background, while her piercing gaze swept the courtroom, taking in every detail before focusing on the laptop she pulled from her government-issued briefcase, the device covered in security stickers and warning labels that made several jurors lean forward, squinting to read the classifications. Michael Chen approached the witness stand with measured steps, his trademark blue booty somehow making him look more serious rather than whimsical as he began laying the groundwork for what was about to unfold, his questions precise and carefully worded, while Agent Torres typed in a series of complex passwords, her fingers moving across the keyboard with swift efficiency. the sound echoing in the now silent courtroom like distant gunfire. Sarah watched as her years of suspicions and careful documentation were about to be validated, her heart racing as Agent Torres connected her laptop to the courtroom display system, the government security protocols requiring 3 separate authentications before the screen flickered to life, revealing a dashboard of surveillance data that made several spectators gasp audibly while the court reporter's fingers flew across her stenotype machine, trying to capture every detail. The temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees as Agent Torres began her testimony, her voice clear and professional, as she explained how the NSA had been monitoring Reynolds Technologies for the past 18 months, their investigation running parallel to and completely independent of Sarah's own discoveries. The jury sat transfixed as satellite photos and surveillance logs appeared on screen, each piece of evidence adding another layer to the elaborate conspiracy Sarah had stumbled upon. Morrison's senior assistant quietly slipped out of her chair, edging toward the courtroom doors, but found her path blocked by 2 stern-faced federal agents who had materialized seemingly out of nowhere, their badges glinting as they gestured for her to return to her seat. The prosecutor himself appeared to be aging in real time, his face ashen as Agent Torres pulled up timeline after timeline showing how Sarah's security logs had intersected with the NSA's own investigation. The storm outside had settled into a low constant rumble, providing an ominous backdrop as Agent Torres reviewed the full scope of the operation, her testimony painting a picture of corporate espionage that went far beyond what even Sarah had suspected, the evidence showing how Reynolds Technologies executives had systematically sold military contractor data to foreign operatives using encryption methods that Sarah had been the first to detect. Chen moved with barely contained excitement as he guided Agent Torres through her presentation, each question designed to highlight how Sarah's cybersecurity expertise had uncovered patterns that even some of the NSA's own analysts had missed, the jury scribbling frantically in their notebooks, while Judge Martinez leaned forward in her chair, her earlier skepticism replaced by intense focus as the true nature of the case unfolded before her. Detective Rodriguez had pulled out his phone, texting rapidly to what Sarah assumed was his department as Agent Torres revealed connections between Reynolds Technologies and known foreign intelligence assets, the implications of her testimony reaching far beyond the corporate espionage charges that had initially brought them to court, while 2 more federal agents quietly entered the room, taking up positions near the emergency exits. Thunder cracked overhead as Agent Torres turned to face Sarah, directly acknowledging how her diligent work had provided the NSA with crucial missing pieces of their investigation, her professional validation washing away 2 years of doubt and humiliation, while Morrison's carefully constructed case crumbled around him like a house of cards in a hurricane, the truth finally emerging with the force of a natural disaster that would reshape everything that had come before. Gasps rippled through the courthouse like waves as Agent Torres projected the first surveillance photo onto the massive display screen, the image showing Reynolds Technologies CEO Marcus Blackwood shaking hands with a known Chinese intelligence operative in the shadowy corner of an underground parking garage, the timestamp matching perfectly with an unusual data transfer that Sarah had flagged in her security logs months ago. The jury collectively leaned forward as Agent Torres methodically presented photo after photo, each more damning than the last, showing clandestine meetings between company executives and foreign agents in hotel lobbies, dimly lit restaurants, and private airport hangars, the evidence forming an undeniable pattern of conspiracy that stretched back nearly 3 years, while Sarah's attorney Chen stood with quiet satisfaction, watching his client's reputation being restored with each new revelation. Morrison had loosened his tie completely now, his collar dark with sweat, as Agent Torres pulled up a series of encrypted messages that Sarah had detected but been unable to decrypt during her investigation, the NSA's superior resources having cracked the code to reveal conversations about military technology transfers that put American defense contracts at risk. The prosecutor's earlier mockery of Sarah's technical expertise now ringing hollow in the face of irrefutable evidence. Sarah felt her hands trembling as she watched Agent Torres display network diagrams that mirrored her own careful documentation, the NSA's investigation, validating every suspicion, every red flag, every instance of unusual network activity that she had reported to her superiors, only to be dismissed and ultimately fired, the vindication washing over her in waves as Torres explained how Sarah's security logs had provided crucial connecting threads in their ongoing investigation. The courtroom had grown so quiet that the sound of papers shuffling seemed thunderous as Agent Torres revealed how Reynolds Technologies had compromised military contractor data across 7 states using access points that Sarah had identified in her final report. Before being terminated, the jury's notepads forgotten as they stared transfixed at the web of connections displaying on screen, their faces showing a mix of shock, anger, and growing understanding of the case's true magnitude. Detective Rodriguez had been joined by 3 more law enforcement officials who slipped quietly into the back of the courtroom, their presence adding to the growing sense that something much bigger than a simple corporate espionage case was unfolding, while Agent Torres continued her testimony, explaining how Sarah's discovery had accelerated an investigation that might otherwise have taken years to complete. Lightning flashed against the courthouse windows, illuminating the faces of Reynolds Technologies executives in the gallery, their expressions shifting from smug certainty to growing horror as Agent Torres revealed surveillance photos of their own clandestine meetings, their carefully constructed alibis crumbling in the face of time-stamped evidence that corroborated every detail of Sarah's original security reports. Chen approached the evidence screen with measured steps, his questions drawing out specific details that connected Sarah's internal investigations with the NSA's broader findings, each point landing like a hammer blow against Morrison's now defunct prosecution, while Judge Martinez watched with an expression that had moved from judicial impartiality to barely contained anger at how the truth had been buried beneath layers of corporate deception. The storm outside seemed to move in synchronization with Agent Torres' testimony, thunder punctuating key revelations as she demonstrated how Sarah's security protocols had detected patterns that even Reynolds Technologies' most sophisticated encryption couldn't hide, the evidence painting a picture of corporate betrayal that went far beyond simple profit motivation into the realm of national security threats. Sarah watched as her former supervisors shifted uncomfortably in their seats, their earlier confidence replaced by nervous glances toward the federal agents now stationed at every exit, while Agent Torres pulled up financial records showing offshore accounts, transfer logs, and shell companies that tied Reynolds Technologies executives directly to foreign intelligence operations, the scope of the conspiracy expanding with each new piece of evidence until it seemed to fill the entire courtroom with its poisonous implications. Morrison dabbed at his forehead with a monogrammed handkerchief that had long since become saturated with nervous sweat, his previously immaculate appearance now disheveled as Agent Torres continued her systematic dismantling of every argument he had made against Sarah, the NSA evidence validating not only her technical expertise, but revealing how her security protocols had detected patterns that the agency's own analysts had missed. Tears welled in Sarah's eyes, but she refused to brush them away, letting them fall freely as 2 years of being cold, paranoid, incompetent, and attention-seeking were washed away by the weight of federal evidence. Agent Torres' testimony revealing how Sarah's careful documentation had helped uncover a conspiracy that reached into the highest levels of Reynolds Technologies, each new piece of evidence landing like a vindication of her professional judgment. The jury that had once looked at her with skepticism now couldn't take their eyes off the overhead screens as Agent Torres displayed intercepted communications between Reynolds Technologies executives and their foreign handlers, the timestamps perfectly matching the suspicious network activities Sarah had documented in her reports before being escorted from the building by security guards who now sat uncomfortably in the gallery, their faces pale with the realization of what they had been party to. Chen moved through his questions with surgical precision, each one designed to highlight how Sarah's cybersecurity expertise had identified vulnerabilities that the conspirators had believed undetectable, the technical jargon that Morrison had earlier mocked now revealed as crucial evidence of sophisticated espionage. While the prosecutor seemed to physically shrink in his expensive chair, his earlier swagger replaced by the demeanor of a man watching his career implode in real time. Agent Torres pulled up a series of encrypted messages that Sarah had flagged during her final weeks at Reynolds Technologies, the NSA's decryption revealing conversations about military technology transfers that put thousands of American jobs and millions in defense contracts at risk, the scope of the betrayal expanding with each new document, while Sarah's original security reports were shown to have identified every major player in the conspiracy. Detective Rodriguez had moved to the front row, his notebook filled with names and connections, as Agent Torres reviewed how Sarah's investigation had inadvertently uncovered links to other ongoing federal investigations, the web of corruption spreading far beyond Reynolds Technologies to implicate defense contractors, politicians, and foreign operatives in a scheme that threatened national security at the highest levels. The gallery had fallen into a stunned silence, broken only by the occasional gasp as Agent Torres displayed surveillance photos showing Reynolds Technology CEO Marcus Blackwood accepting briefcases of cash in luxury hotel rooms, while Sarah's network logs showed corresponding spikes in data transfers to foreign servers. Her technical analysis providing the crucial timeline that helped the NSA connect physical surveillance with digital evidence. Morrison's case notes lay abandoned on his table, the pages scattered like fallen leaves, as he watched his reputation as Boston's most successful prosecutor crumble beneath the weight of evidence he should have reviewed before bringing charges against Sarah. The whispers from the gallery suggesting that his own connections to Reynolds Technologies might warrant investigation, while federal agents continued to quietly fill the courtroom. Sarah felt a lifetime of having to work twice as hard to be taken half as seriously fall away as Agent Torres highlighted how her attention to detail and technical sophistication had accomplished what an entire team of federal investigators had struggled to achieve. Her security logs providing the missing links that connected years of suspicious activities into a coherent pattern of corporate espionage and national betrayal. Thunder rattled the courthouse windows as if nature itself was expressing fury at the scope of the conspiracy, while Agent Torres revealed offshore bank accounts, shell companies, and encrypted communications that proved Sarah had been right all along. Her professional judgment vindicated beyond any doubt, while Morrison's attempts to discredit her expertise were exposed as either willful ignorance or something far more sinister, the rain beating against the windows providing a steady rhythm to the systematic destruction of his case. The marble rotunda erupted in chaos as Judge Martinez officially dismissed all charges against Sarah, her voice carrying over the sudden surge of voices as she immediately initiated proceedings against 6 Reynolds Technologies executives who sat frozen in the gallery, their faces ashen as federal agents moved to secure the exits, while Morrison stood at the prosecution table, his hands trembling as he gathered his papers, dropping several that scattered across the floor like evidence of his shattered career. Chen rose from his chair with the quiet confidence of a man who had known this moment was coming, requesting a full jury review of Sarah's unedited security logs, his voice steady as he announced their intention to file a $20 million wrongful termination suit against Reynolds Technologies, the number echoing through the courtroom and causing several company board members to loosen their ties while the corporate attorneys frantically whispered among themselves. Television crews pressed against the courtroom barriers, their cameras catching the moment. A stern-faced FBI agent approached Morrison with a subpoena of the document trembling in the prosecutor's hands as he read its contents, his face draining of color, while 2 more agents appeared at his elbows to escort him to a private conference room for immediate questioning about his connections to Reynolds Technologies and his decision to prosecute Sarah despite overwhelming evidence of corporate wrongdoing. Sarah sat perfectly still at the defense table, watching justice unfold around her like a force of nature as Agent Torres continued coordinating with other federal officials, her laptop displaying more surveillance photos that implicated not only Reynolds Technologies' leadership but also several prominent local politicians who had helped by earlier investigations into the company's activities, the web of corruption expanding with each new revelation. Judge Martinez's voice cut through the chaos like a blade as she issued immediate orders to freeze Reynolds Technologies' assets and secure all corporate servers. Her years of experience with white-collar crime cases evident in the precise legal language she used to ensure no evidence could be destroyed, while FBI cyber teams were already deploying to the company's headquarters, their vehicles visible through the courthouse windows, their lights flashing against the storm-dark sky. Chen approached the bench with a thick folder of documents outlining their civil suit, his legal team already coordinating with federal prosecutors to ensure Sarah's case would take precedence over the expected flood of shareholder lawsuits. While Morrison's brief face tumbled down the courthouse steps, forgotten in the rush to secure documents and defendants, as the case transformed from a simple corporate espionage trial into one of the largest criminal conspiracies in Massachusetts history. The jury sat transfixed as federal agents led a procession of Reynolds Technologies executives out of the courtroom in handcuffs, the same men and women who had smiled smugly through Sarah's testimony, now looking small and afraid as they were rid their rights, their designer suits, and corporate arrogance stripped away by the weight of evidence she had helped uncover, while Agent Torres coordinated with Interpol to track international connections to the conspiracy. Detective Rodriguez moved through the chaos with purpose, gathering names and contact information from key witnesses, while Sarah's original security team from Reynolds Technologies approached Chen offering to testify about how their warnings had been ignored and their evidence suppressed by corporate leadership, their faces showing a mix of guilt and relief as they finally found the courage to speak the truth. Sarah felt a lifetime of professional barriers and prejudices crumbling as fellow cybersecurity experts in the gallery approached to shake her hand, their earlier skepticism replaced by genuine respect, while news reporters shouted questions about her technical methods and investigative procedures, the validation of her expertise finally overshadowing any prejudices about her race or gender. The storm outside reached a crescendo as Judge Martinez issued her final orders for the day, her gavel cutting through the chaos like a thunderbolt, while Morrison could be seen through the conference room windows, his head in his hands, as FBI agents laid out evidence suggesting he had been fully aware of Sarah's innocence before bringing charges, the once mighty prosecutor's career ending in the same building where he had tried to destroy Sarah's reputation just hours before. Lightning flashed across the darkened sky as Sarah descended the courthouse steps, her head held high while a wall of reporters surged forward, microphones extended like spears, their questions overlapping in a cacophony of curiosity about her technical methods, her emotional journey, and her plans for the future. Chen stood beside her, announcing their $20 million wrongful termination suit, his voice carrying over the storm as camera flashes created a strobe effect against the gathering darkness. Agent Torres appeared at Sarah's side, her NSA badge glinting as she handed over her business card with a knowing smile, explaining how Sarah's cybersecurity expertise had proven invaluable to national security and expressing interest in discussing future collaboration opportunities, while news helicopters circled overhead, their searchlights cutting through the rain to illuminate the courthouse steps where justice had finally prevailed. Through the rain street windows of an FBI surveillance van, Morrison could be seen slumped in questioning, his $1,000 suit wrinkled and damp as agents presented evidence of his collaboration with Reynolds Technologies executives, text messages and emails revealing how he had deliberately suppressed evidence of Sarah's innocence in exchange for considerations that were now being traced through a complex web of offshore accounts. Sarah's former colleagues from the cybersecurity department huddled under umbrellas nearby, waiting to apologize for not supporting her sooner, their faces showing genuine remorse as they watched federal agents lead more Reynolds Technologies executives out of the building in handcuffs, while tactical teams secured the company's servers and documents across 3 states, the scale of the investigation growing with each passing hour. Chen's legal team worked efficiently behind them, coordinating with federal prosecutors to ensure Sarah's civil case would benefit from the mounting evidence of corporate malfeasance, while news crews broadcast live updates about the international implications of the technology theft and the growing list of prominent figures implicated in the conspiracy, their cameras capturing the moment Morrison was formally charged with obstruction of justice. Detective Rodriguez emerged from the courthouse with a team of financial crimes investigators, their expressions grim as they catalogued the extent of Reynolds Technologies' betrayal, while Sarah stood in the rain, letting it wash away 2 years of doubt and humiliation, her professional reputation not just restored but elevated by the revelation of how her technical expertise had uncovered a conspiracy that threatened national security. Agent Torres conferred with her NSA colleagues, their voices low as they discussed the broader implications of Sarah's discoveries, her security logs having revealed vulnerabilities in other corporate networks that would require immediate investigation, while corporate technology officers across the country began reviewing their own systems against the patterns Sarah had identified. The sound of handcuffs clicking shut echoed from the FBI van as Morrison was officially taken into custody, his career and reputation destroyed by his own prejudice and corruption, while Sarah's mother pushed through the crowd of reporters to embrace her daughter, tears mixing with rain as years of standing strong against discrimination and doubt finally ended in triumph and vindication. Sarah felt a weight lift from her shoulders as she watched Reynolds Technologies CEO Marcus Blackwood led away in chains, his earlier condescension replaced by the hollow-eyed stare of a man facing decades in federal prison, while Chen spoke to national news outlets about the broader implications of corporate discrimination and the cost of ignoring qualified professionals because of race or gender. Thunder rolled overhead as Sarah prepared to leave the courthouse, steps her dignity and expertise finally acknowledged, while Agent Torres coordinated the next phase of the investigation that would reach into boardrooms and government offices across the country, the storm providing a dramatic backdrop to a moment of justice that would change corporate America forever. Reporters scribbled frantically in rain-soaked notebooks as Chen detailed how Sarah's technical evidence would support similar whistleblower cases across the country, while federal agents continued to stream in and out of the courthouse carrying boxes of evidence that would unravel decades of corporate corruption and technological espionage, all because one brilliant woman refused to be silenced by prejudice and power.